The New York Giants 2025 schedule is out, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. It's all coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of our written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And folks, we got a lot to talk about. The 2025 schedule is out. I was able to get a look at it before it actually dropped officially. And whew, fasten your seatbelts, folks. This is going to be a wild one, all right? The Giants schedule, the highlights, brutal first 6 weeks, 3 primetime games. The first month of the season is going to be very, very telling because it features 2 games against NFC East opponents. Just some general things, and then before we break it down month by month, the Giants, as we know, coming into this to today, they had the toughest schedule in terms of strength of schedule. Their combined opponents, 0.574 winning percentage, making it the toughest schedule in the NFL. All right. How does that happen, by the way? The team picked third in the draft and they have the toughest schedule. I don't get it. But anyway, the Giants are going to be on the road in 8 of their first 13 games with 2 stretches, weeks 1 and 2 and 7 and 8. Back-to-back road games. They're going to have a late bye week this year, week 14, before closing out the 2025 regular season at home with 3 of their last 4 games played at MetLife Stadium. They have the 3 primetime games, as I mentioned, 1 each on Sunday, Monday, and Thursday night football. All right, that all falls between weeks 3 and 14. 4 teams that they're going to face this year: the Cowboys, Raiders, Patriots, and Saints, they all have new head coaches. And 8 of the teams that they're facing this year, Eagles, Packers, Chiefs, Chargers, Vikings, Broncos, Commanders, and Lions, were all postseason participants last year. All right, so that being said, let's break it down month by month, what to look for, where's the toughest stretch, where the Giants, might catch a break. We'll go through it month by month. All right, starting with September. If there was ever a month that the Giants need to get out of the gate fast, it's this September, folks. I mean, in the past few years under Brian Daboll, the Giants have come out slow. They've looked like they haven't been ready. They just haven't looked good at all. They better not do that this year. All right. So weeks 1 and 2, right out of the gate, they are facing 2 divisional foes. They've got Washington on the road, and then they go to Dallas on the road. All right. So we talk about how can the Giants show success or improvement. They got to start winning games against the NFC East. Plain and simple. Last year, they didn't win a single game against an NFC East opponent, which is just not acceptable, especially if you're trying to show improvement, especially if you're, jockeying for a postseason wildcard berth at minimum. Okay, so those first 2 games are set for 1 o'clock, Washington and Dallas, 1 o'clock local games. And again, they've got to start winning those games. When they played the Commanders last year, the Commanders swept them for the first time since 2021. Now, granted, you could make the argument that the Giants should have won the first game, and they would have won the first game had they had a healthy kicker. But at the end of the day, the score is what the score is. All right, Dallas, meantime, the Giants have dropped their last 8 meetings played at Jerry's World. They have also lost 11 of the last 12 meetings against the Cowboys. So a very challenging start for the New York Giants for the start of the 2025 season with those first 2 games. Now, let's talk about weeks 3 and 4. Weeks 3 and 4 will be home games. The Giants are going to host in week 3 the Kansas City Chiefs. This will be the second time they are facing Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. It'll be the first time that Patrick Mahomes is facing the Giants at MetLife Stadium. That game is a Sunday night game. It was probably put on prime time because, again, the Chiefs, but let's not forget the Taylor Swift factor. Taylor Swift shows up, that'll draw a national audience. It's a ratings thing. All right. So Taylor Swift, for those who probably haven't heard, involved in a relationship with Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce. But here's the thing about this game, this week 3 game for the Giants. The Chiefs, the weeks before, are going to play the Eagles. Okay. That's a rematch of last year's Super Bowl. You can bet that's going to be a hard-fought, tough, and physical game, right? So I'm not going to say that the Giants, can beat the Chiefs right now because obviously we need to see how the rosters come through and the injury report and all that other stuff. But I'm not going to also sit here and say that the game is an automatic L for the Giants, that they're automatically going to lose that game. I mean, when they played the Chiefs last time, I think it was 2021, I believe it was, Giants only lost by, I want to say, 2 Harrison Butker field goals. So it was a little bit more competitive. And, look, you would think with a better pass rush, seeing what the Eagles did to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, you would think maybe, just maybe, the Giants might be able to rattle Mahomes a little bit more. So I'm not going to necessarily put that one as a loss. But that being said, I am, on tomorrow's show, I'm going to give you my predictions. I'm going to go through all my predictions and why, but I just figured I'd throw that one out there. All right. Week 4, the Giants play the Chargers. Okay. So they are going to host the Los Angeles Chargers in week 4. The Chargers lead the regular season series 8-5. Fun fact, ladies and gentlemen, the Giants haven't beaten the Chargers this century. You would have to go back to 1998 for the last time the Giants beat the Chargers, when the Chargers were based in San Diego. So think about it. Eli Manning played 16 years for the Giants, never once beat the Chargers. All right, I think that was one of 2 teams he never beat in his career. And that trend kind of continued after Manning retired. So that's, I'm not going to say that game's going to be a tough one or whatnot, but, a little fun fact there. And again, I'm going to break down the wins and losses on tomorrow's show. Just right now, I'm going through kind of the opponent. So, all right, let's get to October. This one's not easy either. All right. In October, the Giants will see the Eagles twice within a 3-week span. Okay, so that's going to be a week 6 regular season game on Thursday Night Football. And then the Eagles, they will go to the Eagles, aka the House of Horrors, that is the link, 2 weeks later for a week 8 game kicking off at 1:00 p.m. In between, or actually before those 2 games against the Eagles, the Giants will visit the Saints in week 5. That team has a new head coach and former Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. All right, so I mean, if you want to think of, okay, maybe he's an extension of the Eagles, you can, but the good news there is the Saints also don't have an experienced quarterback as of right now. So, again, kind of looking ahead to tomorrow's show, but if there's a chance for the Giants to win a game, you would think week 5 would be the chance against the Saints. All right, so after the first Eagles game, week 6, the Giants will face the Denver Broncos. All right, so they will have a road trip out at Denver. Russell Wilson revenge game. All right, Russell Wilson will go up against Sean Payton, who basically decided, okay, yeah, Russ, you're not cutting it for this team. The Broncos went and drafted Bo Nix as their quarterback. Nix brought him to a playoff berth last year. They didn't go very far, but he got him to the postseason. So that's going to be an interesting game, a kind of a revenge game, if you will, although Russell Wilson will probably downplay it, not knowing him and how he is. But still, it'll be a battle of the seasoned veteran versus the rookie. Well, he's not a rookie, second-year quarterback in Bo Nix. And, that's going to be a fun game, certainly, to watch. So that will close out the month of October. All right, coming up next, we'll take a look at November. All right, it doesn't get any easier, folks. So don't go anywhere. We'll be on that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it's a game winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same game parlay? How could $200 in bonus bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? The possibilities are endless. So if you're new to FanDuel, this is the perfect time to sign up. Head to fanduel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked on Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And tomorrow, I'm going to do a breakdown, a win or loss projection for each game on the Giants schedule as we continue our coverage of the 2025 schedule release. And then we're going to have next week, just a heads up, next week is going to be kind of a quiet week, I think, in terms of Giants news, but pretty soon OTAs are going to start. So we will have that. We will have coverage of the OTAs as we continue our 5-day-a-week coverage here on the Locked on Giants podcast. All right, let's get back to the breakdown of the Giants 2025 schedule. We're now in the month of November. Now, if you thought September and October were tough months for the Giants, November's not any better. All right, so the Giants' next 4 games in the month of November will alternate between home and being on the road. They are all currently set for 1:00 kickoff times. Although again, you've got flex scheduling in that particular time bracket. 3 of the 4 opponents for the New York Giants will come from the NFC North, and 2 of those teams were in the postseason last year. So that would be the Vikings and the Lions. All right. Now, the Giants are going to start the month of November at home against the 49ers. The 49ers currently have a 2-game winning streak against New York Giants, the most recent of which was a couple years ago. It was a 30-12 routing in San Francisco back on September 21st, 2023. The Giants' last win against the 49ers came on November 12th, 2018 at home. That was a 27-23 triumph. All right. So after the 49ers, the Giants head out to Chicago to face Caleb Williams and company. All right. So Chicago is week 10. Then in week 11, they will be hosting Green Bay. And then week 12, they visit Detroit. Okay, now the Packers and the Lions, as I mentioned, they are the 2 of the teams that participated in the 2024 postseason. The Lions finishing as the number 1 playoff seed last year, only to be knocked off in the divisional playoff round by the Commanders. The Lions, look, last year the Lions were in for joint practices in the preseason. Tough team, right? Dan Campbell, former Giants tight end, former Giants draft pick. He's done an incredible job with the Detroit Lions. And, that's not going to be an easy game, especially playing on the road where it's going to be inside and it's going to be very loud. So that's going to be a big time challenge for the Giants. Now, the Packers, the Giants have a 2-game winning streak against the Packers, one of which was against Aaron Rodgers in his final year with Green Bay, and then the second of which came against Jordan Love. So Jordan Love in that game against the Giants went 25 of 39 for 218 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and he was sacked twice. That was an upset game. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was a Monday night game, and that was, I think, the last game that Tommy DeVito won as a starter for the Giants. It was just an upset that particular night. But so yeah, the NFC North will highlight the month of November for the Giants. And I forgot to mention the Giants have a 3-game losing streak against the Detroit Lions. All three games, by the way, that they've lost, blowout losses. All right. So blowout loss is defined as two or more scores. So yeah, the Giants got their hands full in the month of November. Now, what about December and January? Well, let's talk about that. You think, okay, maybe there's a break, right? Because hey, I haven't mentioned when the bye week is. Well, yes and no. You can say that December/January has a little bit of a break. I don't know that it does, but let's talk about it. The final quarter or so of the season will be a Monday night date against the New England Patriots in New England. That'll be their first look at quarterback Drake May, who, if you remember, last year the Giants tried to trade up to get, all right, but they couldn't pull it off. So, the Patriots, they have a new coaching staff. Mike Vrabel is up there. You know, that should be an interesting game. Vrabel. Remember, Vrabel was Shane Bowen's boss in Tennessee. The two of them work hand in hand with the defenses. So I don't know if that's going to be more of an advantage for New England or if it's going to be more of an advantage for the Giants. But that's going to be one of the storylines, I think, of that particular week. Okay. After the week 13 date with the Patriots, which, by the way, is on Monday Night Football, right? You know how I feel about those night games. The Giants will get their bye week. Now, despite the fact that it is late in the season, the bye week, it's actually coming at a good time. Why do I say that? Because 3 of their final 4 games, the Giants games, will be at home, and they are going to be facing divisional foes. So that's when, assuming the Giants are still in it, and I know some of you are saying, there's no way they're going to be in it, not with that schedule. But hey, you never know. That's why you line up and you play the game. But if the Giants are still in it, that's when the final playoff seeds are going to start to fall into place. And nobody is sitting here and saying that the Giants are going to necessarily run away with the division. I don't think they're ready yet. But is a wild card berth a possibility? Sure, why not? I mean, until they show otherwise, think positive, right? So, that being said, after the break, the Giants have the Commanders and the Vikings at home. All right. So then they go to Las Vegas to face the Raiders and Pete Carroll, who is their new head coach. That will be December 27th. And then the Giants close out the 2025 regular season at home against the Dallas Cowboys. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But so, yeah, you've got NFC games, the Commanders, the Vikings, the Cowboys, and of course the Commanders and the Cowboys, NFC East foes of the New York Giants. Now, here's what's interesting to me about the December games, especially those last 4. All right. The Giants are hosting the Cowboys for the first time in the regular season finale since 2020. Now, this is just me guessing because in the past, the Giants have hosted the Eagles or visited the Eagles in the regular season finale. All right. They did it 3 times in a row dating back to 2022. This year, they're doing the Cowboys. Now, why? Why ask why, right? Well, I have a theory. And this is probably just, a wild guess on my part. But you've got to think in terms of how maybe the schedule makers were looking at the regular season finale for the division, all right? So the Eagles, you think of the Eagles, they are the defending Super Bowl champions. I believe the Eagles are getting the Commanders in their regular season finale. The Commanders and the Eagles, the final, who battled for the NFC Championship last year, the Commanders are an up-and-coming team. All right, they did pretty well last year, all things considered, with a new head coach, new quarterback, new ownership, new everything. So just spitballing here and trying to get inside the mind of the schedule makers, it makes more sense to have maybe the Eagles and the Commanders play each other for the finale, where possibly the division might be on the line, the division title, and then have the Giants and Cowboys face each other, where maybe, just maybe, there might be a wild card berth on the line. So that's what I think might have factored in. I have no proof of that. That's just my own theory. But yeah, it's overall it's a really, really brutal schedule for the New York Giants. And you know what? We'll see how that one plays out. Obviously, again, tomorrow I'm going to go through each game. I'm going to give you my predictions, whether they win or whether they lose. But we still have one more segment to do here on the Locked On Giants podcast. So when we come back, some final thoughts about the schedule and what the Giants need to do, besides obviously winning in the division, for it to be a tolerable session for the Giants, is tolerable season. So don't go anywhere. We'll have that for you right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We're talking Giants 2025 regular season schedule. It is out. It is a brutal one. Let's not kid ourselves. The travel itself, not too bad for the Giants. I think the farthest west they have to go is Las Vegas, and that's later in the year. Not a big deal. But, look, this is a tough schedule. But that being said, I've already seen people say, "Oh, the Giants will be lucky if they win 5 games this year." I tend to be more optimistic. All right, it's a new year, it's a new season. You could say, "Oh yeah, the Giants were bad last year," but they improved the roster. The key thing for the Giants is going to be, as I see it, there's going to be a few things they have to do. Number one, they've got to stay healthy. We saw it last year when Andrew Thomas went down on the offensive line. Basically, everything fell apart. So this year, they made sure that they have legitimate backups should anything happen to Andrew Thomas again, right? They've got James Hudson, they've got Stone Forsythe, the rookie Marcus Bowe, probably more of a right tackle, in case they have to move Jermaine Illuminor over, which I don't think they will. But ideally, you want the Giants to try and stay healthy, because if they can't, if that offense sputters, then I'm sorry, the Giants are just, their chances are dead in the water. So staying healthy is the big thing. But see, here's the one thing, besides staying healthy, that I think is going to be so important, and an indication of how successful or how quickly the Giants can get out of the gate when the season starts. Now, Brian Daboll historically has tried to be fair in that, okay, I know what I've got in my starters. Let me take a look at, these other guys who maybe are potential depth players, and, make a decision on them. And in doing so, he has run the risk of not getting the starters, at least in my opinion. He's run the risk of not getting the starters enough work in the preseason. And folks, it has shown when the Giants have come out of the gate in weeks 1 and weeks 2. So that being said, when they get to training camp, come the preseason games, and there's only 3 preseason games, as you know, those starters better be getting action in each of the preseason games. I don't want to hear, "Oh, why risk injury? Oh, it doesn't count." Folks, we saw it the last 2 years. The Giants came out of the gate slow. They were sloppy, and they got their lunch money taken from them. All right? You want to continue to see it? I don't. So, I think there's going to be even more pressure on Brian Daboll, because again, it's a balancing act. I understand, wanting to see what you have on your roster, seeing your depth and all that stuff. It's a balancing act. But if I'm Daboll, you've got to get your starters as much work as possible, not just in practices, because look, practices will only take you so far. You can't simulate the game speed that you face in preseason games, even though those games are not played at full speed. Get them as much work as you possibly can, because if you don't, You're only repeating the mistakes of the past. And, how many times does this team need to repeat the mistakes that it's made in the past before it finally wakes up and says, oh gosh, maybe we should do things a little differently? So that's going to be a real key for the New York Giants to come out of the gate quickly. And that is getting their starters as much work as possible, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where you have several new faces: Abdul Carter, Javon Holland, Paulson Adebo, Chauncey Golston up front, Darius Alexander. If you're going to get those guys a lot of work, and hopefully they will, you might as well get the offense a lot of work. Even though the offense is returning, or at least as of now, it's projected to return 10 of the 11 starters that it had last year. So, Dable, he won't say, if we ask him this early, what's your plan for preseason? I know he won't say anything because he's like one day at a time. But you've got to think that that's in the back of his mind, because if they get off to a slow start and they lose to the first two games to the Commanders and the Cowboys, then, it's going to be another long year. It just is. So we'll see how it all plays out. And again, make sure you tune in tomorrow. I'm going to break down each game, whether I think it's going to be a win or a loss, and why. All right, Giant fans, that will do it for today's Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Now, make sure you check out some of our other Locked On programs. We have Locked On NFL Scouting, which is pretty good. They keep an eye on moves made around the league and how that affects the different teams. So make sure you check them out, as well as our other programs, our college programs, our NBA program, with the playoffs going on, hockey, all that stuff. So check it out. And don't forget baseball too, Mets and Yankees. So check that out. All right, Giant fans, I will see you tomorrow. Have a good one.